Good morning, everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about adapting Tolkien. Now, I'm going to start out by saying there have been many adaptations of his works, mostly Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, over the years. Even when he was alive, he took very great interest in in where his stuff would go in that regard. This is like his child, and so yeah, he was interested in where it went, and he would receive scripts, and he would go over. There was one in the 1950s that they were going to make an animated movie, and he kind of got the impression that these people didn't really understand his works, had no idea what it was about. So it was rejected. It did not get made. There's been stage adaptations, some when he was alive. And he would offer his critiques of these. And, I think he was satisfied with the ones that were made in his lifetime. And of course, he ended up selling all the film rights to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And I think at the time they were going to do a Beatles version of that, of the Lord of the Rings. The Beatles wanted to do it, apparently. They were going to get Stanley Kubrick to direct. I think that would have been cool to have seen. It would have been interesting to see and hear, the music that they would make for that. But whether Tolkien would have approved or not, he probably wouldn't have. He shot it down. Because he didn't like the Beatles. I mean, he was an older man. I mean, he was, in his 70s? Close to 80. And didn't like rock music. I mean, obviously, a lot of old people back then didn't. Nowadays, someone that's like in their 60s or 70s listening to that kind of stuff. And so obviously they like it, but back then, no. The older people would not listen to rock and roll because they didn't have rock and roll in their youth. It was probably just noise to them. And then after he died, John Borman who directed Excalibur, was going to do a Lord of the Rings. He wrote a script. We do know what was in the script. Apparently there was going to be a scene where Gimli would be watching Frodo and Galadriel have sex. Luckily, from what we know, the Rings of Power will not be having nudity and sex in it. But again, who knows what Amazon's going to do? There's been leaks about characters and stuff like that. They're totally inventing a lot of characters that are probably unnecessary. Yeah, Peter Jackson, for the most part, didn't create new characters. There's a few, but they were not major characters. Except in The Hobbit, you had Tauriel and that whole stupid relationship with elf and dwarf, which would never have happened. Yeah, human and elf, yeah, but that would have, yeah. Anything else, no, that would not have happened. But before I talk more about Peter Jackson's films, there was 1978, Ralph Bakshi, Lord of the Rings. I wish the second part of that had been made because it was a really good movie, and I like to see where he would go with that. I think it was pretty faithful. Of course, the BBC did a radio dramatization of it when Tolkien was alive. And, another one in the 80s, and in fact, the actor who plays Bilbo in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings did the voice of Frodo, which is kind of interesting, and I think really cool. Now, when it comes to the Peter Jackson films, there's maybe a few things that I'm like, okay, no. But for the most part, yeah, he stayed true to the themes, and he understood what the book was all about. From what we are hearing about what Amazon's doing, it doesn't sound like they're showrunners who never have nothing to their credit. I don't think they're going to understand it. Um, like, the Second Age is very elf and human centric. Yes, the dwarves were around and took part in the Battle of Lost Alliance. The hobbits just wouldn't be there. And yeah, you could tell a story about what hobbits were doing at the time, but it wouldn't be an interesting story at all, because they didn't have any adventures or do anything great until Frodo and Sam and Bilbo and Merry and Pippin. They were the most famous of all the hobbits. Yeah, it does say in The Hobbit that Gandalf took some on adventures with them and they never returned. Well, as far as we know, those are just rumors from by the hobbits. We don't know if any of that actually happened. You can take that however you want it. But Peter Jackson stayed true. He didn't put any politics or his own beliefs into the story. It had to be what was important to Tolkien. And Amazon should hear what he has said in interviews and should take his advice. But we'll see. I mean, we're all afraid that there's going to be politics in it. And most likely there will be. And the trailer, it just looks like crap. It tells us nothing about the story. Yeah, those of us who've read the books know what happens. We know what goes on. But I think his work should be adapted by people who actually are familiar with the source material and understand it. Not these fake activists and fake academics. There's a right way and a wrong way to adapt his works. And you just gotta be as faithful as possible. Or else it's just not worth doing. And the Second Age show isn't worth doing. Third Age, I think, is more interesting, and there's more stories there. There's more in Appendix A to The Lord of the Rings about the Third Age than the Second. Third Age is more fleshed out. Now, they don't have the rights to this stuff, apparently. They can't get a hold of the Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales, and those two books are important for Second Age. Silmarillion is especially important for First Age, but that stuff, no one will ever... I don't think anyone will ever be even allowed to touch it, which is good. Because if you're going to take that and then make all new characters and stuff, come on, that'd be dumb, because there's hundreds of characters in there. I mean, Tolkien created more than 700 characters. There's no need to make it up unless you're doing fan fiction. And that could be what this is. It's glorified fan fiction. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And in the future, anyone who makes an adaptation of it should know that. They should know how to do this right and what to stay away from. And the Amazon show will probably show them, because there's probably stuff that Amazon will get right in the show. I'm kind of okay with new characters in certain cases, like if you want to talk about the Haradrim and what happened there. Definitely, I mean, the ring wraiths have no names. We don't know who they are, and I would love to see their stories. Who are they? What did they do before they were ring wraiths? And show what the wraithing process looks like. Them turning into these invisible beings that terrorize you, that frighten you, that scare you. So that stuff would be interesting to see. I think young Aragorn, for me, would be the best story to tell. I just love that character. It's my favorite character in the books. And when I first read them, I didn't really have a favorite character. But after watching the movies and then rereading the books over and over, I finally ended up picking one. I am going to read a quote from Tolkien about the movie that was going to be made in the 1950s. If I can find it in this book, there's a book I got in front of me that a reference work that I bought a while ago. If I can find it. Okay. It says, to speak frankly, the storyline before me gives the impression of being hasty and overheated. I am prepared to be told that it took Mr. Zimmerman weeks or months, but the impression remained that it is nonetheless the product of a hasty reading of the original, which has failed to appreciate the tone and significance of the narrative. It appears to be based primarily on the memory of this reading, altered by the adapter's private imagination, and the resulting script does not seem to have been compared very carefully with the books. This seems to me to be shown by various points, which I do not cite as of great importance in themselves, but as evidence for my opinion. And this was a letter that he wrote criticizing that script, where he did say he doesn't think that the scriptwriter understood what it was all about. So when you're adapting Tolkien's works, you have to understand what it is about. Otherwise, you're not going to understand it. You have to actually read it, not skim through it. And when you do that, when you actually read it, and you understand what it's about, you will make a faithful adaptation, even with the changes that you will make, that are in the spirit of Tolkien, and that will please Tolkien fans. Just because you are against what Amazon is doing doesn't mean you're a purist. Because you like the Peter Jackson films, despite the flaws in it, which are few in my opinion. So we'll see what happens, and that's pretty much it. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow.